95 AD, Rome. The morning air is heavy with the smoke of pagan altars and the faint, lingering memory of yesterday's martyrs. Heat shimmers above the stones. Every breath tastes of dust and incense. At the Latin gate, a restless sea of people presses close, their murmurs rising like a storm. Then silence falls as the soldiers bring him forward. John, the beloved disciple, the last living apostle, the one who leaned against the heart of Jesus at the Last Supper. His face is lined with years, yet his eyes burn with a peace the empire cannot understand. A massive bronze cauldron waits in the sun, filled to the brim with oil that seethes and roars like a living fire. Flames lick beneath it. The heat alone forces the front row to step back, shielding their faces. They bind John's hands with iron. The chains clank. The pulley creaks. Slowly, reverently, almost, they lower him into the furnace. The oil hisses and flashes white with steam. The crowd holds its breath. Then, the impossible. The raging boil stills. The flames beneath the cauldron seem to bow. John rises, untouched, unharmed, radiant, not a hair singed, not a mark on his skin. He steps out as calmly as if he had only bathed in warm water, and the oil clings to him like liquid light before falling away. 10,000 witnesses fall silent. Some drop to their knees. Even the soldiers stagger back, shields forgotten. In that moment, heaven itself answered Domitian's cruelty with quiet, unshakable power. Death had no claim on the man Christ loved. The world softens the cost of following Jesus. We won't. From the Roman arenas to the unspoken persecutions of Christians today, Mrs. O and the Martyrs brings you the unfiltered stories of millions who counted everything lost for the cause of Christ. I'm Nat. Let's remember their courage and deepen our faith together. The only apostle not to be martyred, though not for lack of trying, was the Apostle John, often called the beloved disciple. He was one of the 12 disciples of Jesus Christ. He was the son of Zebedee, brother of James the Great, and author of the Gospel of John, the three epistles, John 1, 2, and 3, and the book of Revelation. He was also the youngest of the apostles. Alongside his brother James, was called Boanerges, or Sons of Thunder, by Jesus. He was part of Jesus' inner circle along with Peter and James and witnessed the transfiguration. He also witnessed the agony of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. In his gospel, he refers to himself as the disciple who Jesus loved, which really endears me to him. And at the cross, he was entrusted with the caring of Mary, the mother of Jesus, before the Lord was crucified. After Pentecost, AD 30 to 33, John was a leader in Jerusalem alongside Peter and James. Along with Peter, he faced persecution by Jewish authorities and was arrested. Eventually, John was arrested in Ephesus and summoned to Rome in AD 94 or 95 for his refusal to sacrifice to Domitian or to acknowledge his divinity, leading to accusations of treason for his refusal to worship the Roman gods. He was arrested during the height of Domitian's persecution. He arrived in Rome chained. When he was brought for trial, the prefect Domitian ordered John to be plunged into boiling oil at the Latin Gate in Rome, but was miraculously unharmed and survived, astonishing onlookers as he was immersed in a cauldron of boiling oil or pitch, eventually emerging unscathed. This miracle led to him being exiled to the island of Patmos after his persecutors feared further divine intervention. In Patmos, the Lord Jesus appeared to John and instructed John after a series of visions to author the book of Revelation. In his life, he opened 7 churches mentioned in Revelation, namely the Church of the Ephesians, Smyrna, Pergamon, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Under the new Emperor Nerva, John was released from exile and lived to an old age, eventually dying of natural causes in Ephesus around AD 98 to 100. He was buried in Ephesus. Titus Flavius Domitianus was born on October 24th, 51 AD in Rome. He reigned from September 14th, AD 81 to September 18th, AD 96. He was the son of Emperor Vespasian and Domitilla the Elder, younger brother of the Emperor Titus and Domitilla the Younger, married to Domita Longina, with whom he had a son who died young. He was born in Rome during his father Vespasian's rise to prominence under Nero. Unlike his older brother Titus, who was groomed for leadership, Domitian had a relatively obscure youth, overshadowed by his family's military and political success during the year of the four emperors in AD 69. When Vespasian became emperor, founding the Flavian dynasty, Domitian was kept in Rome, often sidelined by given minor honors like the title of Little Caesar. Domitian became emperor at 29 after the unexpected death of his brother Titus in AD 81. His 15-year reign, one of the longest of the early emperors, was marked by autocratic rule, economic reforms, and military campaigns. Domitian, a meticulous administrator, strengthened the Roman economy with currency reforms, improved border defenses, and restored the damage caused by the Great Fire of Rome under Nero. He also rebuilt Roman temples, public buildings, and the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. Domitian centralized power, demanding to be addressed as Dominus et Deus, or Lord of God. This alienated the Senate. His paranoia led to purges of suspected traitors, earning him the reputation for tyranny among senatorial historians. Although he was considered intelligent, he was insecure, prone to suspicion and cruelty. Many said he was less charismatic than his father or brother, as he preferred to rule in isolation. Domitian's reign is associated with the second major persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire following Nero's. While less documented than Nero, Domitian's persecution targeted Christians for their refusal to participate in the imperial cult and their perceived threat to Roman social order. The imperial cult was based on Domitian's insistence on being venerated as a divine figure, and this intensified conflicts with Christians who rejected emperor worship as idolatry, pledging allegiance only to Christ. This was seen as subversive, especially as Domitian enforced loyalty through religious observance. Due to his paranoia, he led crackdowns on groups he perceived as disloyal. This included Christians, Jews, and even philosophers. His demand for absolute loyalty clashed with the belief of one God, namely Jesus Christ, by the Christians. Unlike Nero's persecution of the early church, which was largely confined to Rome, Domitian's persecution was sporadic and empire wide, targeting prominent Christians, especially in Rome and Asia Minor. It was less systematic but still brutal, driven by accusations of atheism, rejecting Roman gods, and maestas, treason. Under Domitian, Christians faced exile, imprisonment, torture, and execution. This included banishment, as the Apostle John was sent to the island of Patmos. Execution was either by beheading or crucifixion for crimes of refusing to sacrifice to the emperor or some Roman god. He also imposed heavy taxes on the Christians and Jews. Refusal to pay or comply often led to persecution. He implemented a law that no Christian brought before the courts could be pardoned unless they renounced their faith. Domitian was assassinated on September 18th, AD 96, in a palace conspiracy involving his wife Domitia, courtiers, and the Praetorian Guard. Stabbed by a freedman named Stephanus, his death ended the Flavian dynasty. The Senate declared damnatio memoria, condemnation of memory, the ultimate punishment the Roman Senate could inflict on the deceased, basically trying to erase one from history itself. Dionysius the Areopagite was a first century Athenian judge at the Areopagus court and converted to Christianity by the Apostle Paul's sermon in Athens around AD 54. Sorry about that. Born around AD 9 in Athens, Dionysius came from a wealthy family, was married with children, and was highly educated in Greek philosophy and astronomy. He studied in Heliopolis, Egypt, where he witnessed a solar eclipse during Christ's crucifixion. When, sorry about that. When he witnessed this, he remarked, God suffers or everything is lost. Baptized by Paul around 54 AD, Dionysius abandoned his judicial career to become a bishop of Athens. It is also reported that he met Mary, the mother of Jesus, in Jerusalem. Dionysius' martyrdom is documented in several Christian sources, though details vary and some confusion exists due to the conflation with another figure, Dionysius, Denis of Paris. The most consistent narrative places his martyrdom under Domitian in AD 96, likely in Athens. Dionysius of Corinth was martyred during Domitian's persecution of Christians, which targeted those who refused to participate in the imperial cult or offer sacrifices to the Roman gods. After learning of Paul's beheading in Rome AD 67, Dionysius, inspired to emulate his teacher, openly preached the gospel with his disciple Rusticus and Eleutherus. Use my Latin. This led to their arrest and execution under Domitian's orders. In Martyr's Mirrors and Fox's Book of Martyrs, they state that all three men were beheaded in Athens AD 96. At this time, beheading was most used by Rome against the Christians. They were primarily targeted for their refusal to renounce Christianity. Domitian's persecution was sporadic but targeted prominent Christians, especially in Rome and provinces like Asia Minor and Greece. Dionysius, as a high profile convert and bishop, would have been prime target for his refusal to renounce Christianity. Nicodemus was a prominent figure in the New Testament. Nicodemus was a Pharisee and a member of the Sanhedrin who visited Jesus at night in John 3 1 to 21, assisted in his burial, John 19 39 to 40. Early Christian sources describe him as a benevolent Christian of some distinction who suffered martyrdom during Emperor Domitian's persecution of Christians. Nicodemus, as a former Jewish leader and Christian convert, was a notable figure, making him a likely target. His prominence in the Gospel of John suggests he held social standing, which aligns with descriptions of him as quote, of some distinction. The martyrdom of Nicodemus took place in Rome during the second persecution of Domitian against Christians. This too was a targeted persecution for his refusal to participate in the imperial cult worship or offer sacrifices to Roman gods. Although it is not explicitly described by sources to the manner of his executions, many believe he was beheaded. Timothy was a prominent figure in the New Testament and a close companion and disciple of the Apostle Paul, often referred to as, quote, my own son in faith, unquote. He was the first bishop of Ephesus and a martyr under the Emperor Domitian. Timothy was born in Lystra, Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, to a Greek father and a Jewish mother named Eunice. He was raised by his faithful mother and his grandmother Lois. Converted by Paul during his first missionary journey around AD 50, Timothy became a trusted co-worker, accompanying Paul on missions and serving as an envoy to churches in Thessalonica, Corinth, and Ephesus. Paul appointed him Bishop of Ephesus, where he oversaw a thriving but challenged Christian community. As bishop, Timothy combated false teaching and maintained church order as instructed in Paul's pastoral epistles. In late January every year, a festival known as the Categoria of Artemis would take place, a wild citywide party celebrating the bringing down of Categoria, the image of Artemis, from the temple on the hill in the outskirts of Ephesus. Thousands of pilgrims and locals would wear grotesque masks and costumes. Priests and priestesses would carry a statue of Artemis, the famous many breasted image covered in egg ornaments. They would have a procession through the streets waving clubs, torches, and phallic symbols, while flute girls, drunken dancers, and unique priests whipped the crowd into a frenzy. There was full degeneracy on display and would beat scapegoats or anyone who seemed to oppose the goddess or their revelings. It was basically the Ephesus equivalent of a Mardi Gras mixed with ancient pagan rituals. It was in this setting that Timothy, the beloved son of faith, called by Paul, filled with zeal for the Lord, at 80 years old, stood alone against the drunken, masked mob, carrying their idols through the streets and preaching the gospel, was attacked and beaten to death. 2,000 years later, the temple of Artemis lies in ruins, yet Timothy is honored by millions of Christians around the world. The single act of boldness in the middle of Ephesus's biggest pagan festival. Timothy is remembered as one of the Apostle Paul's major companions who died as a martyr. Domitian demanded to be called the Lord and God. Two men refused. The Apostle John was boiled alive in oil before a Roman mob, yet walked out untouched, radiant, and silent. Heaven's verdict on the emperor's pride. Timothy, 80 years old and frail, stood alone in Ephesus streets during the wild Artemis festival and shouted that Jesus alone is Lord. The idol worshippers beat him to death with their ritual clubs. Domitian's statues were smashed, his name chiseled off every stone, his memory damned forever. John and Timothy, their names are still on our lips 2,000 years later. That's the score when men play God and God's people refuse to bow. Thank you for watching. Hit like and subscribe and keep standing. See you next time. God bless.